Would you allow me to tell a story? It is the children of Israel wandering in the desert, passing the same pork and bean can about every 36 months and wondering how they're going to get out of there. And, is there no end to these sand dunes? A little of this goes a long way. And they send Moses up to the top of the hill to see if he can converse with anybody up there. And Moses ascends, taking Joshua and leaving him halfway up the hill. And Moses goes to face the Lord and try to obtain whatever priesthood or principles or covenants or commandments or tablets or directions or roadmaps that it takes to get out of here. Now, they're trying to get out of Egypt. The Lord's trying to get Egypt out of them. That's part of the dynamic of having to undo 400 years in an apostate, difficult, foreign world for these children of Israel. So, Moses goes up the hill and faces God, hearing the word of the Lord, seeing the finger writes on these tablets. He's there stunned for day after day after day. It is a long experience, as you know. And he's getting the very direction that he went there to get. He is getting the instruction, the covenants and the principles and the commandments and the promises about how to get home. If you want to get home, Moses, this is what you do. And some of it's going to be written on these little tablets. I don't want to talk to you about it for quite a little while. And let's get one thing straight. Before we start writing, let's just understand this. Before I can talk to you about chastity and loving your parents and a lot of other things that matter in Rexburg, we've got to get one thing straight. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Now, I want to get onto those other subjects, but I can't say anything about that until you get that through the head of these little people down there. That's part of the reason you're not home now. That's part of the reason you do keep seeing that same pork and bean can. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Get rid of those gold calves. Try to forget the Pharaoh. All that you went through down there in that world is not going to exist now when we go home to a land flowing with milk and honey and in my covenant promise. So write it down. And in fact, here's a second one, just in case anybody forgets. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Now, I've only got 10 commandments and I've given you 2. I've used up 20% of my tablets. A fifth of the space available to us is gone, but it's worth it. None of this other stuff's going to matter unless you understand that. So here's Moses, all in a tizzy, getting all of this down and ready to pack his tablets down the hill and get these people home. And guess what's going on down at the bottom of the hill? They think he's been gone too long. They think he went over the top of the hill and grabbed a sack lunch at the bottom and went on somewhere. He's probably out backstroking the Mediterranean. And they're concerned, and they say to Aaron, who was left in charge, look, he's gone, you better get us out of here. I'll read what they said. Up to Aaron, make us gods which shall go before us. For this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. That's sort of Elizabethan 17th century language. It's a little hard to understand, but that's what it says. Moses has taken off. We don't know what's happened to him. You better whip us out a gold calf. We've got to get out of here. And we're used to relying on gold calves. Thus the conversation at the top of the hill. Okay? Dramatic case in point. Well, Aaron, what does he do? What should he do? Well, he says, bring me the earrings and the bracelets and the necklace that your boyfriend gave you while he's on his mission. And I will work with them and we'll get this calf. He received them at their hand, these gold elements, he received them at their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool. After he made a molten calf and said, these be thy gods, O Israel. And they had a great party. They had one of the all-time great parties. It was heard from Dan to Beersheba. In fact, Joshua hears it halfway up the hill, and he thinks there's a war on. He thinks the Babylonians have swept down in some sort of reverse encounter, and he, the great military man that he is, he wants to thunder down and get his slingshot. Moses, at the top of the hill, is getting a little more direct information. The Lord says, Moses, we've got a problem. Why don't we just cut this conversation short here for a minute, because you remember the gold calves we were just talking about? And so Moses reluctantly says, okay, I'll be back. Let me lug these tablets down the hill and see if they do any good. But as he gets down the hill and Joshua says, look, the battle's half over. We should have been there. Our guys are losing. And Moses says, yeah, they're losing all right. But it isn't any battle. What he literally says is, it is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome. That is not victor or vanquished you hear down there. It is the noise of them that sing. The noise of them that sing. That's like I sing. That's sort of show me the way to go home. The worst, it's ever been sung. They're just having the kind of party that isn't appropriate on the Ricks College campus. And Moses is heartbroken about it. I guess in a lot of ways he would wish it were the Babylonians. You could do something about that. But what do you do about this crowd? Well, you know what happens. He comes down the mountain brokenhearted and breaks the tablets and says, I will not, I cannot, I won't bring to you what I felt in the presence of the Lord. I'm simply going to take this figurative roadmap and tear it up, and we've got to straighten a few things out. Breaks the tablets, destroys the gold calf, pours it in the water, makes them drink of it, a kind of symbolism, I suppose, involved there, and then there's a fist fight. And he says, let's get a couple of things straight here. Who really wants to go home? Who believes in why we are going home? And there's a little debate about the God of Israel, and 3,000 people lose their lives. And then at that point, with all of that dust settling, he walks up to Aaron. Moses said unto Aaron, what did this people unto thee, that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? What'd they do, brother? Literally, his own brother. What'd they do? Did they tell your kids they couldn't go to seminary? Did he poke bamboo sticks under your fingernails and did the Vikings lose a game? What possibly could have happened to so destroy your morale that you would have done this? Here's Aaron's answer. Let not the anger of my Lord wax hot. Thou knowest the people. They're set on mischief. This is a lousy crowd. You knew it. You and I are the only straight arrows around here. We ought to get this thing straight and leave town. Said, you leave an unruly batch like this with me, they start messing around. I can't control them. There's not a duty to God winner in the crowd. I want to go home. And here's his actual account of. You'll be able to separate, won't you, the sort of Holland commentary from the actual scripture, I'm sure. They said unto me, I am now quoting, they said unto me, Aaron, make us gods, which shall go before us. For this Moses, the man which brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. Now that is literally what they said. That is an exact quote of what they said. Fair enough, Aaron. But now here's his little postscript. And I said unto them, this is the part that's new, whosoever hath any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and I cast it in the fire, and there came out this calf. I am reading the actual record. I have to make that distinction between what I'm contributing and what the book is. I am reading from the 32nd chapter of Exodus. I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. Leaped right out at me. I just sort of dumped this gold in there, and straight out of that fire came this calf moving for all he was worth. Now, I beg your pardon, please. How did that calf come out of there? Aaron received them, these gold pieces, at their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool. He spent 6 weekends with a big Black & Decker up at the shop working on this thing. And he has the sort of audacity to stand up to Moses and say, well, I sort of dumped this stuff and I was nearly run down by this calf coming right out of this fire. I've tried that, and so have you. I've done that. I still do it a little. My wife says. I'm not as flagrant in it. I'm a little more discreet, but I used to do it a lot. My mother is a great cook, and my wife has continued that tradition, and I'm sort of a living example and display to that end. I sleep with 2 chairs on each side of my bed to hold my cheeks up. So I don't get stretch marks on my temples up here. But my mother used to bake cookies. And she'd say on her way to Relief Society, now little sweetheart Lammykins Poochie Poo, don't eat those cookies until I get home. We're going to have a little dinner, sort of all the vitamins and the 5 basic groups and all of that. Or is it 7? And then we will have cookies. I didn't care about any groups, 5, 7, or 20. I wanted cookies. So I say, okay, Mom, gotcha. Right on, Mom. Go do your own thing, Mom. As she heads off to teach her Relief Society class. And to show how indiscreet, I suppose I was, unwise, that's why I'm wiser in this day and age, I didn't even let her get out of the driveway. Anybody would have at least followed her down to the street corner and seen her turn the corner, not me. No, there I am, as she comes back in having forgotten the keys to the car. That's how much time I give her. Having forgotten the keys to the car, she comes back in and I'm there. lid off the jar, both hands stuffed. Great heaping mounds of cookies in both hands. And she, like Moses, wise and sensitive and careful, says, what happened? You know, a little leadership tip there about how you approach a problem. I guess you give people enough rope to hang themselves. I don't know, but foolish, like Aaron, I said something about as smart as a calf running out of the fire. Just walking by and the old cookies jumped out. And you see that is not going anywhere. She's not buying that. And so you just go deeper. Then you say something stupid like, well, you told me if I ever touched them not to put them back. And it's sort of like quicksand. Every movement you're about up to here. And that's okay for an 8-year-old, but it isn't okay for an 18-year-old. Not really. And it isn't okay for an 80-year-old, which Aaron and I are now. At some point, we really sort of need to grow up. What I'm really saying is, Aaron's propensity, Aaron's inclination here is to say, look, Moses, this is everybody's problem but mine. I haven't got a problem in the place. Those people out there, you know them. You know these people, Moses. They're lousy bounders. We've never been able to get a bandolo on one of them. You know how other problems are. And gee, aren't things tough in Jerusalem today? And hope things are settled in Peking. But don't ask me about the dorm on the Ricks College campus. I haven't got a problem in this world. Occasionally a calf runs out at me, but it's not my fault. Well, some of us are fashioning calves in the living room of our dorms, I promise you. And our wards, and our homes, and our families, and our classes. Compare that, will you, with Moses' response. Now he told the Lord he'd be back, and he has to be back. And he says, you have sinned a great sin, and I will go up unto the Lord, and peradventure I will make an atonement for your sin. Moses returned unto the Lord and said, oh, this people have sinned a great sin. How can he bear it? How can he do it? The very speech he was given, the very thing that he's there getting written with the finger of the Lord on these tablets, and he taking quick notes on a 3x5 card so that he doesn't remember to give the speech. The very message he's had about gods of gold, graven images, no other representation of deity before us, and he goes down and here's this wild party around a gold calf. And he comes back to face the Lord and said, they've sinned a great sin. They have made them gods of gold. And my guess is that absolutely chokes in his throat. I don't know that he can get that out very well. Now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and he's on the verge of a request. Lord, can you turn a blind eye one more time? Give us one more shot at that pork and bean can. I know we can get out of here. But he can't even bring himself to ask it. The sentence stops. There's a hyphen in the print, and he can't continue the question. He cannot bring himself to ask for that favor. And he changes his course. He said, Lord, if you cannot, if not. He's really so embarrassed and so disappointed, and I think literally so heartbroken, that he can't even bring himself to say, Lord, once more, can we try once more? Compared to what he felt and what he saw, what he heard from God and what he heard from these songs and singers of a sort of selfishness. It's anybody's problem but mine here. He can't even go on with the question and shifts and says, if not, Lord, if you cannot forgive them, blot me, I pray thee, out of the book which thou hast written. The one man who could go up there and say, Lord, I've had it. I'm up to here with those guys, my own brother included. There isn't one in the crowd that I can depend on any given Sunday to show up and perform any priesthood tasks. The home teaching isn't done, no visiting teaching, no kindness, no charity, big gold calves in every living room. I've had it. Now he's the one man in the room, collectively, figuratively speaking, who could have said that. He's the one man that was not guilty of the transgression. But what does he say? Lord, if somebody has to pay, could it possibly be me? Blot me, I pray thee, out of the book which thou hast written. They've got to go home. I know they've got problems. I know they're not all they should be, and I know they're not keeping the commandments. At least not as many of them as they should be. But Lord, whatever else they are, they're my people. And Aaron, big grown kid, should know better, a high priest in the church, former bishop and stake president and mission president. I know he should know better. But Lord, he's my brother. And if somebody has to stay, if somebody has to mill through these sand dunes, could it possibly in any way be me? And could you find it in your heart of hearts to let them go home? What makes a man or a woman do that?